Hi, I'm Joyce Harper, Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London. Welcome to Season 3 of my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? This season, we'll be diving into topics that explore how to achieve good health and happiness. I'll be speaking with leading experts who will provide evidence-based advice and debunk some of the many myths around our health. Additionally, I'll be having conversations with individuals who bring unique perspectives through their lived experiences. In Season 3, we'll cover a diverse range of topics, including reproductive anatomy, inspiring female icons, chronic health conditions, factors that influence our well-being, and global women's health issues. I really hope you enjoy Season 3 of Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? It's a great pleasure to talk today to Professor Pauliina Damdimopoulou about how everyday chemicals affect our health. Pauliina is Professor of Reproductive Biology at the Department of Women's and Children's Health at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm in Sweden. With over 15 years of experience in endocrinology, reproductive biology, and toxicology, Pauliina's team are investigating the effects of chemicals on female fertility. Her ambition is to generate evidence-based information on the risks of chemical exposures and pharmaceutical treatments to human ovaries and oocytes, and to thereby contribute to the development of a chemically safer society. And she co-leads the environmental endocrinology focus area of the European Society of Endocrinology. Welcome, Pauliina.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about your career and what led you to want to work on environmental toxins.
Great. Yes. So I was born and raised on a farm in Finland, and there's no academics in the family. So I've been able to build my career based on my interests. And I don't think I even regarded it as building a career. I was just following what I wanted to do. And I think early on, I got very interested in biochemistry, the chemistry of life. You know, we're made of cells and molecules, and then the fact that there's a lot of animals that are known to adapt their biology based on the environment. It could be the light cycle or the food they eat. Somehow made me very curious about the way we can adapt our health and bodies to the prevailing environment. And then when we now know that we're adding thousands of new chemical structures to the environment that were not there before, let's say, a century ago, then the questions about how this type of extreme modification of the environment is affecting us. What will we become when our diet, for example, contains thousands of man-made chemicals? So somehow along those questions, I ended up then studying the environmental chemical contaminants and their impact on female reproductive health, because that's also a gap in the field. We know more about males than females, and I really would like to restore the balance and provide more information about female health.
Wow. And the work you're doing is so important, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. Can you tell us, what does environmental toxins actually mean?
Right. So I think there's several different words: toxin or toxicant, or just say human-made chemicals, which is what I prefer to say so that it's more clear what I'm focusing on. I think toxins often refer more to toxic substances made by living organisms. Let's say you have a poisonous mushroom, that would be toxins. But what I'm focusing on would be maybe more like human-made toxicants. So these additional substances that didn't exist before, or they might be natural substances, but they are brought up by human activity. So anthropogenic activities leading to toxic substances, materials like plastics in the environment. So for simplicity, I just talk about environmental chemical pollution, but maybe environmental toxicants would be a better word, but simply stuff that ends up around us because of our activities.
Yeah, which is very, very worrying. And one thing that's always worried me is that we think the public think that chemicals and drugs are tested. And I did a biochemistry degree as well, and I was very aware when I was studying that we don't test, and how we test is very inefficient. And I met you when you gave the most brilliant talk in Uppsala in Sweden, and I made lots of changes to my life when I heard your talk, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you had a slide titled, "We are not very good at testing chemicals." So I think the public think that these chemicals in our environment are safe. And we are hearing every week now about another chemical that it's decided it's not safe. So can you tell us, let's start at the beginning, how do we test these chemicals in general? And especially, I know you work on the reproductive system, which obviously I'm very interested in. So how are they tested in general? And if we're saying that we've looked at a chemical's effect on reproduction, what would we have done as well then?
Right. So I think the general problem is that we've been producing chemicals for a long time, and the awareness of environmental damage by chemicals has been developing much later. So in the starting point already, we have a big bunch of tens of thousands of chemicals that have been taken into use and put on the market without any testing. And then we are trying to develop the testing requirements on the side, because now we agree that chemicals can have undesirable side effects when they end up in the environment and in our bodies, and we don't want that. But how to reconcile the existence of so many untested chemicals and the desire to have safe chemicals, that's a very tricky thing to do. So, for example, we say that in the European Union we have a very good chemical legislation, because we have a legislation at least as a starting place. And then there's the chemical strategy for sustainability, that is the ambition to have safe chemicals by 2050. Circular economy, and environment wouldn't be harming our health. That's the ambition. But it's really difficult, because we have, I think the estimate is 70% of the chemicals we use in different products are very poorly tested. And then also the testing requirements, if you want to put a new chemical on the market, they are tiered. So it's by the production volume. And reproductive toxicity is a feature that comes in the highest production volumes. So if you produce your chemical in over 10 tons or 100 tons a year, that's when you have to do an experiment about reproduction. And this is by a single manufacturer. So you could have multiple importers or companies, and they would all have the same rules. So the net effect could be much more of the chemical. So when it comes to so first of all, this type of chemicals in consumer products, it's nothing like pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals we're testing over 10 years, 15 years, and very, very strict requirements. For the industrial chemicals, consumer product chemicals, so let's say 1,000 tons is the limit. Then the ultimate test is a rat exposure. You never use monkeys. I mean, this is a common misunderstanding. There's never ever any primates being tested for industrial chemicals. It is the test requirements are rat. And when it comes to women's fertility, it's pretty limited, right? We make one egg a month, and we have menopause, so we have a certain reproductive window. We live a very long life. And now rats become sexually mature super early. They can produce 20 eggs at a time. One rat can have thousands of offsprings in its lifetime of about 2 years. So it's a different fecundity, different level of fertility altogether. So this is what we use to model a woman. And these rats would be exposed to the chemical in a couple of different concentrations for, I think, 2 to 4 weeks. Then they're mated, and then we count if there's pups. So basically, can the female get pregnant, and how many pups will she deliver? And then there's some endpoints about the estrous cycle, the hormonal changes during the cycle, like humans have in the menstrual cycle. And then it's the weight of the ovaries. But this is more or less everything that is done for the female fertility part, which I find very concerning, because when we look at the common reproductive health issues women face, let's say, polycystic ovarian syndrome or endometriosis or let's say just infertility difficulties getting pregnant, earlier reproductive senescence, menopausal transition starting early. I really don't understand how taking the weight of a rat ovary could protect from these endpoints in humans. So in my opinion, in my expert opinion, we don't really test the right things at all to have a protective measure for female fertility. For males, for the male side, I'm sure there's a lot more work to do there as well. But for the male side, it's become quite well established that sperm counts are very sensitive to exposures. So we have a very sensitive endpoint that is relatively easy to measure, both in men and in rats. I mean, you can take the sperm sample and look at the reproductive organs. And that is used already, and it is often the most sensitive effect seen. But if that is sensitive enough to protect females, I don't really know. So I think we need to find those endpoints that we can start testing to have be sure that we are also safeguarding female fertility. And yeah, for sure, sperm is easy to collect and analyze, and ovaries are so mysterious. They're deep inside the body. They'll only give you one egg a month, and you cannot really collect those for research. So this is like a fundamental problem in knowing even what to measure in a woman to have a good sensitive endpoint for toxicity testing.
I knew things were bad, but when I heard you say this in Sweden, I was even more horrified. You've said it so clearly. Let's just unpick a few of the things you said. So you said there are some chemicals in our environment that haven't been tested at all, and there's, I think you said 70% who have minimal testing, and our fertility, the effects on fertility is checked, as you said, in rats. So let's unpick that slowly. So just to be sure that there are chemicals that we are exposed to that, in your view, have, even just apart from our reproductive system, just for our health, that they have not been shown to be safe, and they're in our environment and they're being put into some of the things that we are exposed to every day. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, as a starting point, we don't even know how many chemicals we have on the market. So we don't have global registries where the manufacturers would log in exactly what chemical they have innovated and what is in their products and how much is produced and in what products it is used. So the problem of even knowing what to test is a huge one. There's reports saying maybe we have 100,000 human-made chemicals on the market, others said 350,000. And then also the report on the 350,000 chemicals said that about, I think it was about 20% were confidential business information. So we basically know absolutely nothing about those chemicals. So to know how many exactly have been tested, it's really difficult to say. So I think it's a bit like, you go to the forest to pick mushrooms. Would you pick any mushroom without knowing if it has been tested? But this is a bit the situation, that the chemicals we have on the market, they eventually end up contaminating the environment because we have no circularity in the economy. They are not recycled. They're not taken care of properly when the product comes at the end of its life cycle. And this kind of leaching to the environment, it's uncontrolled. We don't know how much and where, but if we do environmental sampling, we do find many different kinds of chemicals. And we're kind of working under the street lamp. Researchers like me often focus on the chemicals that we are aware of. We study very often plastic additives like phthalates and bisphenols, or parabens in cosmetics, or the PFAS chemicals that are also a very hot research topic these days. So we tend to talk about those, but there's very many unknowns on the side. We don't even know how to measure all the chemicals. It's also a science in itself to have a method to be able to reliably measure an exposure. So for sure, I maintain my opinion that most of the chemicals on the market in the environment have not been tested following the safety testing requirements in the European Union now, not even the rat assay, and we are exposed to mixtures of chemicals we've recently produced and put in the environment, and how this collectively affects, for example, female fertility and reproductive health. It's very difficult to assess and know. We don't have unexposed populations that we could compare to. What would the normal female physiology look like without this type of exposures? We have no idea of.
I just, I just get so I'm almost speechless, which is very rare. Um, let's pick up on the fertility. So would when humans start to be exposed to these chemicals, is anyone monitoring what's then actually happening with people's fertility? So we are the guinea pigs. The humans, we are always the guinea pigs, because a guinea pig is not a human and rat's not a human. So when any of these chemicals end up when humans are exposed to them, surely we should follow up, um, and check what's actually happening in the humans. Does that happen at all, especially around fertility?
So, if we pick that apart, I think one big area is the biomonitoring of the exposures. So having proper human biomonitoring programs to know how exposures look like across age groups and males, females, or regionally is a very important activity that should be done. In the US, they've had the National Biomonitoring Program for a long time, and that data is available online for anybody who wants to see. I think they follow about 200 or 300 different selected exposures in a representative subset of the Americans. Um, well, given the current landscape, I don't know if this program is still continuing, but up to now it has been a nice point of reference. In the EU, we haven't really had. They started recently human biomonitoring for EU project. So some kind of activity is going on also to have a European level understanding of what the exposures are. Emerging contaminants. Often we see, for example, if we restrict the use of one chemical, the levels tend to go down, but then the replacement chemicals go up again. So this type of information, of course, is fundamentally important to know what to test and measure and what to even pay attention to. But then to connect this type of exposure data to health registries, that's not really being done on any kind of national or continental level anywhere. And of course, there we also have a lot of issues related to the costs. Measuring chemicals is horrendously expensive. You can sequence your genome and genes for much cheaper than you could look at your chemical exposures. And then, of course, a lot of data protection. It would be unimaginable to start connecting reproductive health registries across all countries to exposure data. So that would be fantastic for the research. But of course, information about our health, and especially reproductive health, is particularly sensitive and requires a lot of consenting, of course, and things like that. So it often information comes from cohort studies that researchers like myself or my colleagues start and look at a specific group of patients or individuals and try to make these connections. And then, of course, the issue is that we cannot afford having 1 million people in the cohort, so it's often quite limited, and that restricts the statistical power and that limits of what kind of effects we can detect.
Yeah, I think one issue, as you said, is these things are costly. I know they cost a lot of money to do any sort of clinical trial. But the other thing you mentioned earlier was that some of these chemicals are secrets. They're protected by the companies. So the companies will do their research to have a look at what's their chemicals doing, but then they keep it within their company. And if they do any trials and find anything when they've invested billions in a chemical, whether they come clean with that, and as you said, it takes people like you to do the research. So you can see there's this big disconnect in really understanding these chemicals in our environment.
The role of the producers and the industries in the safety testing. So within the EU, the idea is that the producer they have to test the safety of their product. So it's what is it now? No safety testing, no market type of principle. But of course, industries would follow the regulations. I don't think it makes sense to do extensive testing unless you're legally required. So this is why the chemical legislation is so fundamentally important, that we have the right test requirements that the industries have to follow and report to the authorities. So that's another completely other area of research, but just wanted to point out that it is the industry that should be ensuring their products are safe, and they do it following the current legislations. And then, of course, afterwards, since there is the test requirements are, we can't demand to test absolutely everything. That would be also unfeasible. So our understanding of human health develops with time, and that's why academics like me can then start asking the questions, but what about this effect, what about that effect? And this also then leads over the time to better understanding of what is a critically sensitive health effect. And when they are then started, when we start using those in calculating safe levels of human exposure, these thresholds of safe exposure go down. There's multiple examples of chemicals that, 20 years ago we had no issues at all, because we had never done a risk assessment to look at the safe level of human exposure. Then we use a simple endpoint and get something, and then 10 years later we update based on the research information, and suddenly it's thousandfold less exposure that is considered safe. So this is the evolution of the risk assessment that is connected to academic research and the research findings, and it is not the same as the testing requirements that a new chemical has to go through before it's placed on the market. So it's a combination of different kind of research and legal requirements and so forth.
You've mentioned about some chemicals, but what products are the chemicals that we should be worried about found in? And just following up what you've just said, so we can see now why chemicals that have been in our environment for a long time are then now deemed as unsafe because of the work that's done, and the threshold level goes down and down and down. And so then we say, right, so talc, and recently was something in nail varnish that women are using. So what sort of products are these chemicals found in our environment?
Mm. So I mentioned earlier that we work under the street lamp, and with the sets of chemicals we know are out there, and we can't really discuss where the unknowns are, of course. But um, we talk a lot about plastics these days, because plastics and chemical industries are tightly interlinked. Plastic is, of course, it's a polymer, but that would never work out unless it had a lot of chemical additives that keep the product the desirable attributes, like should it be hard or durable or soft or a certain color or tolerate sunlight or freezing or whatever. And I was just looking at the report on the state of the science in plastics industries. And for example, it says that, now I have to see where the information, yeah, so plastic chemicals are produced in volumes over 9 billion tons every year. So 9 billion tons of chemicals just for use in different type of plastics. And we don't quite know all the additives or the substances used, but this report was suggesting that at least 16,000 different types of chemicals are needed to make plastics. And often these are not really linked to the polymer, so that they can leach into the environment from the plastic. And there as well, like, it's really not nice numbers. Very few of these chemicals are subject to any kind of global regulations at all. So that's now becoming more and more clear that some of the chemicals we discuss, like certain phthalates, basically all of the production of that phthalate is due to the use in plastics. Or bisphenol A as well, nearly all the production is due to the use in plastics. So I think this is something we haven't really um, paid attention to before, like how tightly chemical industries and plastics are interlinked. And then we have to understand that plastics are not only, say, what would I have here? It's like actual plastic that we can understand, but it's also our clothes, so to say. Cars are mainly made of like plastic type of things, or Of course, the food packaging, that's also easy to understand. But I think the biggest plastics industries is the packaging, is the transport sector, construction. Our homes, it's not like we have, stone and wood anymore. It's all like materials. And often these materials fulfill like the definition of plastics. So that's clearly a big part of the exposure is our use of these human-made new materials out of polymers with the associated chemicals. So that's one thing. And then, of course, another, as you mentioned, cosmetics do have a lot of different type of. I mean, it is made of different type of chemicals, of course, and they're applying on our faces, on our bodies every day. That really has been also shown that some of the cosmetics associated chemicals correlate with how much we use makeup or personal care products or perfumes, especially. So I would maybe looking at the current state of the knowledge, if we can reduce our reliance on plastics at home and like maybe reduce that down with the product usage, cosmetics or whatever, that would already be a good starting point for being aware of our personal exposures.
It's scary. So sorry, everyone. That is scary, but I think we, I think we really, really do need to hear you say this and understand. In the UK, the UK Breast Cancer Charity are trying to run a campaign to find out what's in makeup. That I've signed the petition because we need to understand that we don't know what's we are surrounded. As you said, we are surrounded. So when I heard your talk in Sweden, I came home and I got rid of lots of things. I got rid of my plastic. I got rid of my spatulas, my plastic chopping boards. I changed my clothes wash. I changed my dishwasher tablets. I have stopped using shower gel a long time ago and been using organic soap. My skin has never actually felt so gorgeous. Actually, I've changed what body lotion I'm wearing. I don't wear perfume. I remember you saying about perfume before that anything that smells is a real problem. And I've recently been reading about scented candles. I have got a scented candle on right now, but I've also got a log burner behind me. So in our houses, Pauliina, what should we do in our day-to-day life to try and reduce our exposure to these chemicals? Just go for it. Tell us what you would do if you walked into somebody's house. How would you clean up their act? I think this is so important, so important.
Right. So, an important feeling here is not being scared, but it's being upset. I think this is an important switch we need in our minds. Like, I'm just upset about the situation as it is. Like, how come do we keep producing more and more materials and chemicals, not paying attention to the safety testing and environmental human health aspects? And then we connect all these products to like social media. I have children, they're crazy about getting the newest stuff all the time, so it's like this, like our feeling good is connected to consuming more and more products, and it doesn't make any sense, so it makes me upset. So I do changes. Of course, I hope they help me reduce my exposure, but maybe because I'm not a part of that business. I don't want to contribute to the ever increasing need of more products on the market. It's crazy. I think we're on the wrong track in having, how would I say, fulfilling life. It can't be 20 different makeup products in the morning. That's crazy. So fine, the changes I've done, the things I don't want to do at home is, I mean, yeah, it's minimal personal care product use. Of course, I shower. This is the question. Yeah, but how can you stop using deodorant? Like, no, I don't. I use deodorant, I shower, I clean my clothes, but I do avoid everything with perfume. I'm really asking myself, how many things do I need to apply on my body to feel good about myself? Can I feel good in some other ways than like using more and more products? In the kitchen, I think this is an important place in the house because, of course, food is a good big source of exposure as well. So we know that ultra processed food it's not good for the health anyway, but it also contains more microplastic, plastic related chemicals, because it's been processed so thoroughly in, the factories producing the food, traveling through multiple pipelines and processes, and every step can increase the contamination. So I mean, of course, when I when I have the time, I will cook from the beginning. And but obviously, again, like I can't be completely, you know, uh, it's a grayscale. Sometimes life is hectic with kids and the family, so fine, we can solve some nights dinners by having ready prepared food or ordering from a restaurant or whatever. But most of the time, cooking from the beginning, when I can, buying organic, and then really avoiding plastics, non-sticky cookware. A long time ago, we got rid of all those Teflon pans, and now it's a cast iron, and they are extremely durable. I think I can basically give them to my children when they move out. When you learn how to use a cast iron pan, it's fantastic. No plastic utensils coming in contact with those, with the cooking. My lunch boxes are glass. Just really avoiding plastic contact or heating in plastic in the kitchen. That's a good point. And then finally, it's also been shown that what we have in our homes tends to accumulate in the dust. So dust samples from people's homes have been used in research as a like indicator of your chemical landscape inside your house. And of course, dust is in the air, we breathe it in, and if you have children, they tend to be on the floor. So actually, it is good to try to vacuum clean often to have um, less of this dust around. So airing and cleaning regularly can also help in lowering the home exposures. Then there's also been a discussion of like having electronics, at least not in the bedroom, because your TV set, of course, is full of flame retardants. You don't want to cause a fire because of an electronic appliance catches a spark and starts burning. So electronics is a source of different types of chemicals, of course, and the longer they are on, they get warm, they can also basically release to the air. And we spend a lot of time in the bedroom sleeping, so it's been like said that it's better if you keep your electronics in maybe in the living room, and your bedroom is more like a free zone. And this is good for multiple reasons, not only for the potential chemical contaminants, but also staring a screen is going to make your sleep worse, and all those things. So that's some of the things I've done at home. Looking at the kitchen, the way we eat, trying to reduce the use of cosmetics. I'm really discussing with my children as well the what's the meaning of the constant need for new products and cosmetics. It really doesn't make any sense. Could we feel good about ourselves in some other way? And that's what we're practicing.
Wow. It's phenomenal because I think people are convinced that their home environment is safe, and you've made it very, very clear that we really do need to reduce all this stuff. We are so consumerizing all this stuff, and the makeup and the perfume and the body lotions and the cleaning products that women expose themselves to. I think it's been playing in my mind since I've heard you talk that we're talking so much about women's health, and we're talking about so much about women around menopause and the symptoms they're having. And I think we see a lot of symptoms that 10, 20 years ago we didn't talk about. There's also the psychological symptoms. And I think part of that's the busy environment we're living in. But I'm also worried about things like the female cancers and osteoporosis and other things. I'm just worried that maybe one of the issues is that women are exposed. I think women are exposed to a lot more chemicals than men would be exposed to, because we have to know we do most of the cleaning. We do. Lots of people wear makeup and perfume. I think they're much more prevalent in women. And I just wondered, do you think that women are exposing themselves to more chemicals than men?
Yes, so this has been shown that the use of personal care products, cosmetics, perfumes tends to be higher in women, and this correlates with higher body burden of, for example, phthalates and chemicals like that. And there's been focus studies on beauty salon workers or nail salon workers because they spend all their days in this environment, and they have a bit higher risk for different type of reproductive health issues, and also higher exposure. So we know this, that when it comes to cosmetic chemicals, women are exposed to higher levels.
Wow. And you did mention food, ultra processed food. So I got in around social media this week because I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's a trend that people have been told that originally it came from ovarian hyperstimulation, that people going through fertility treatment, there's a risk that they have a condition called ovarian hyperstimulation, and that eating McDonald's French fries would reduce the risk of getting ovarian hyperstimulation. And then it got extrapolated to, if you eat McDonald's fries on the day you have the transfer, it will improve your chance of getting pregnant. So I was quite horrified by this. Obviously, I would never eat McDonald's fries no matter what. And I've been through IVF, and I know it's just a trend and it's a little bit of a ritual, but I got quite upset about that the IVF community were practicing such a ritual. And I did a couple of reels about it on social media, and I got absolutely slated by some of the people going through IVF who absolutely horrified. One person arguing with me and she argued with a few other people that McDonald's fries were not unhealthy. So I think that what you are saying, a lot of people are going to be shocked, especially about things like makeup and the nails. Every time I look at a woman with nail varnish on now, I think, oh. And I think they have been so. I'll be controversial. They've been so brainwashed by the companies, the big companies, that these chemicals are safe and our environment's safe and what we're using in our kitchen is safe and on our face and our body. I'm sure they think these chemicals are safe. So what do we say to people who don't want to hear this, who are in denial that the chemicals in our environment are not safe?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't heard about this McDonald's thing, but doesn't surprise me. I would love to know, like, track back where all these social media trends come from. Like, who starts them? Because they really make no sense. And knowing how long it takes to make reasonable research, getting, everything from the license work in place to start a cohort, to recruit the patients, and then to follow, for example, eating McDonald's fries impact on the IVF treatment, ovarian stimulation, oocyte quality, which is often ultimately measured by live birth rates. All these would take years. So when there's a viral trend that starts like this and it becomes the truth, I feel like I should learn something about that. How can I get the research findings I've achieved over the past 10 years? How could I spread them as efficiently? That would be fantastic if we actually got the real evidence-based observations out as well. I don't know how to do that, and I'm jealous of this social media impact, and then scared as well because I don't know why people want to believe TikTok more than the actual clinicians or researchers. So that's clearly a thing. And then for the testing, of course, the industry can say that we have tested our products and we followed all the testing requirements. And the catch is that the testing requirements are not good enough. They are not in place. There is nothing major, like we discussed. You can say that my product is tested for female reproductive toxicity and it's safe. That means that the ovary in the rat didn't grow in size or the rat got pregnant. I mean, that's what it means. So it's the complexity of our current society is such that it's very difficult for the individuals to be experts in every aspect. So just to simplify, reduce our stress levels, of course we want to believe what people say, because otherwise it feels like the responsibility of interpreting every piece of news and statement by the industries or whatever is kind of on me. And that's too much to bear. So I think here's something that leads to the reptile brain just wanting to believe what we see if it makes our life easier, right? So this is probably a fundamental underlying factor in why simple news gets so quick spreading and people want to believe, and you don't want to believe anything else because it's too complicated. But the facts are there. We are not good at testing the chemicals that we put on the market. Chemical and plastic industries are growing every year. What we are now experiencing is only a fraction of what our children or grandchildren will have if we don't make a change now. So increasing exposures. We also know there's increasing IVF treatments because people are having tough time getting pregnant for multiple different reasons. And that's of course the other thing. We cannot. The most common question is like, yeah, but if it's the chemicals, then why is not everybody sterile by now? And I'm like, it's right, exactly. But it is multifactorial. It is the combination of we are getting older before we start a family. That means longer exposure to the environment. We have a varying genetic components. Women, if anyone should understand, take the contraceptive pill. Do we all react the same to the pill? No. There's widely varying effects of the pill. So why would a random mixture exposure to chemicals have exactly the same effect in everybody? It doesn't. But we can see on the population level that the side effects are there, the adverse effects are there. And you will have women who are wearing their beautiful makeups and perfumes and have no problems. But maybe there's other women who have more unfortunate genetic composition, or they've been exposed during the fetal life or whatever, and for them it makes a difference. Maybe they are 35, 40, they want to have a child and everything is already, fertility goes down with age and it's not going to get better with these exposures. So I think it's a collective effect we are seeing in the population, and it's always difficult to say about the individual how it will be exactly for you. Just like it is impossible to say for the individual that having this genetic variant will give you a heart attack. We know that this genetic variant will increase your risk of getting a heart attack, but we cannot guarantee you get it or you don't. Same with the chemicals, but somehow it is much more difficult to understand that it's the same type of um, factors affecting the net outcome of the exposures. So yeah, learning how to communicate better to get people to understand these complexities, also making them feel that it's not about being scared, it's about being upset. You don't want to contribute to this development. You want to break this circle by reducing your use of these products. The products wouldn't be on the market if people didn't buy them. I mean, that's the principles of how our economies work. And then demanding a change. And you can also, I mean, we all can vote. You can really make a difference by helping those politicians in power who actually want to make a change to the chemical legislations and environmental safety.
I think you're right here about you said about making people's lives easier, and the chemicals and the ultra processed food, they are making people's lives easier. So yes, it's easier to eat McDonald's fries than to cook your fries at home. And there was a paper out just a couple of days ago about ultra processed food increasing chronic health conditions, which you and I know, but we need to see the papers. But will people listen? Will people think, well, okay, I know that, but it's just easier for me to go and get a takeout or not cook at home. And I did a reel yesterday about let's make lifestyle sexy. Let's make home cooking, sexy. Eat something good, or it's quality, not quantity of food. And social media is just rife. And I've been talking to a lot of people after I got all these negative comments about my post about McDonald's fries. I spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of people are convinced that these companies are actually paying people on social media to promote their product, which obviously they are, but to promote their product, but not to tell anyone that they're being paid by them and promote this unhealthy lifestyle. So before we delve a little bit more into your work, can you just say, so some of these chemicals, what is the problem that they can actually cause? We'll talk about fertility in a moment, but what other problems? So we heard about the ultra processed food increasing the risk of chronic health conditions. So, and I've just done some podcasts about osteoporosis and diabetes and Alzheimer's and dementia. And I've got some coming about heart disease and lung disease. So what is the risk of these chemicals on our body?
I think you have a very important subject there. So, of course, our bodies are not isolated organs. So it is, it's a connected system that keeps us our health and well-being or makes us sick. So, for example, for the male side, decreased fertility, sperm counts goes hand in hand with reduced testosterone and androgens, and that goes hand in hand with your cardiovascular health, and just all cause mortality is also higher in people who have fertility issues. And this is how our health, the chronic diseases you're talking about, they tend to be connected. Ovarian health, I mean, ovaries make all the steroid hormones, and for women, estradiol is very important in keeping our cognitive health and our cardiovascular health in right place. And of course, that's why also then, perimenopause, menopausal transition that changes completely the ovarian hormone production is connected to osteoporosis and brain health and all these things. So it is a combination. And I focus on the ovaries because I've decided I'll try to be an expert on one thing, but obviously it would affect the whole body. It's just too much for me to handle to look into everything. But we do know that. So development in particular is a sensitive process for exposure. So we have a lot of focus on the fetal development, how chemical exposures during pregnancy might affect the outcome of the pregnancy and the fetal or the child development. I was in a part of a big Swedish or actually European study that focused on neurodevelopment. This is very sensitive also to different type of disturbances like chemical pollution, and we were really able to show that exposure to mixtures of chemicals made of bisphenol A and phthalate and the PFAS chemicals correlated with delayed language development in the children. So really the level of maternal exposure was affecting how the children were, saying their first words and what age and so forth. And language development is then connected to later neuropsychiatric diseases. We know that there's linkages between autism spectrum disorders or things like that. And so definitely the same batches of chemicals, it's always a mixture. And we are all exposed. And depending on what field you're working on, you will always find some kind of effects. So I think it's almost like if you're building a house and it's raining all the time and you don't keep your construction covered, obviously the quality of the house in its entirety will be lessened. And in the research community, because understanding the whole human body is just too much, we tend to focus on certain organs. But yes, the effects are probably across the body, directly and indirectly, for example, through the hormonal system and ovaries. So yes, we have the health, the chronic disease susceptibility as a whole is probably also linked to these exposures.
We're upset. We're not scared. I like that. I'm going to keep you saying
Who thought this was a good idea?
it's a good idea. But also, I do feel anger. I am feeling angry. Are we allowed to feel? We're allowed to feel angry as well. Upset and angry. Your work, as you say, is around fertility, and many of these chemicals we call them endocrine disruptors. And I don't go to any fertility conference now without there being a talk, ideally by you, about endocrine disruptors. And you talked about hormones. So, can you just explain what endocrine disruptors means? And I assume they're everywhere and everything.
Yeah. No, so I mean, endocrine system means the hormonal system in our bodies that typically works by one gland, like the ovary secreting a hormone like estradiol that can travel in the blood and end up in another part of the body, maybe in the bone, where you have a receptor, and then the hormone binds to the receptor and has a certain biological outcome there. And this system should be in balance so that our health or development goes correctly. And for some reason, a lot of these human-made chemicals can disrupt this balance of the hormones in the body. The work really started in the 90s when researchers found out that growing cells in the lab, certain plastics where they were grown, affected the growth a lot. And then we, over years of work, some of the pioneers of the field found out that the plastic was leaching some of these additives that were like estrogen hormone and affecting the growth of the cells. And then we started to observe that using the estrogen receptor as a model, a lot of chemicals can disrupt the activation of the receptor and how it affects our health. So that's how the field of endocrine disruption was born. And it's been widened to the androgen receptor for testosterone, male hormones. Of course, also women have androgens, and the receptor is important. Talk about the progesterone receptor, thyroid hormones, so important for the development of the nervous system, control of the body weight, for metabolism, all these things. So we know that these receptors can be disrupted by many chemicals. Human-made chemicals have no specificity for a receptor. So of course pharmaceuticals might be developed, like the contraceptives, to really target these receptors. But if you make a chemical that you just want to make your frying pan non-sticky, obviously it has no specificity. So again, my expert opinion is that the, the there are effects through the receptors, but it's not like they're just doing this receptor and not the others. It's a collective disruption and also many other mechanisms. But yeah, as an example, for the male side, it's now been very well established that some of the phthalates can reduce the levels of testosterone or androgens during development, and that will disrupt the masculinization of the whole reproductive tract. So the androgen receptor is not getting the right signals, and the development of the male reproductive tract is disrupted, and the consequence is that there's a slightly increased risk of certain congenital malformations of the reproductive tract, and then the lower sperm counts later in life, lower fertility, lower androgen levels in the body. That also connects with the higher risk of cardiovascular disease and so forth. So hormonal system is extremely important, especially during the development, to keep our bodies in check. And then development, we think of babies, right? But making eggs is a developmental process we have going on in our ovaries throughout the fertile years. Making one egg, it's deposited as an immature little oocyte in the ovaries, and it takes a year to mature it to ovulation. It's a year of a growth and development process to make an oocyte or egg ovulate in the end. So I would say that that's why also ovaries seem to be a target of these exposures through our lives, because it's a continuous development of the follicles to maturation.
And you've been looking at, as you said, the development of the embryo and of the ovary. And in your talk that I saw, you showed that you had detected some of these chemicals that were toxic chemicals. Actually, you didn't like the word toxin, but they were unhealthy chemicals, and you'd found them in various fluids of our reproductive system. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That was so worrying. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, right. So, I mean, the chemicals that we get into our bodies, it's not like they're only in the blood circulation. They will end up in the organs like the ovaries as well. And also, they can cross the placenta and end up in the fetus. So, fetus is directly exposed during the development. But I mean, here, I think it's important to connect dots with different type of observations, because we can do controlled exposure studies in humans. So then it's about observing cohorts of women, for example, going through IVF, which is a part of my studies, measuring the chemicals, relating them to their lifestyle, and then just seeing how the IVF treatment worked out, and the pregnancies and so forth. So I think I showed an example of the forever chemicals, the PFAS chemicals, that are extremely persistent in the environment. They tend to accumulate in our bodies by age. And then we just noticed that women who had higher exposures to these chemicals tended to have lower odds of having a good quality embryo in the IVF treatment. And then we decided to use a cow ovary, like a bovine model, as we say, as a proxy for the human. And there we could see that if we use the type of exposure levels we find in human ovaries and we expose the cow eggs and then fertilize them and follow the embryo development, we were really able to see similar effects that, exposure levels that are relevant for women were leading to changed gene expression and epigenetics in the embryos. And if we increase the levels a little bit, we could also see an inhibition of the whole embryo development. So I think this is very important that we can connect experimental models to what we see in humans. Another example is the phthalates that we know are toxic to male fertility. They have been regulated due to their endocrine disruption and reproductive toxicity in males, and we don't quite know what they specifically do to females. But we were able to see that women who had these phthalates in higher levels in their ovaries didn't respond to the hormone stimulation as well. So the eggs didn't mature as well as they would have in the women with lower levels. And then we started looking at so what is changed, and we could see that really it is the steroid or the hormone metabolism in the follicle is changed, but there's also more inflammation and the energy production in the follicle seem to be different. And now we're following up this with experimental studies in the lab where we take the phthalate and we expose human ovary explants and we see if we get the similar effects. And we always tend to find similar effects. And maybe that's one of the, I would say, one of the key observations of my studies so far is that um, this type of general disruption of the cell leading to inflammation, inflammatory responses, altered energy use in this, cells use mitochondria for energy that seems to be disrupted. These are very common to all the chemicals that we use. So it is, as I said, there is no specificity. Surely the chemicals can disrupt the hormone receptors and the production of hormones in the body, but they do also affect the cell's capacity to communicate, to attach to each other, and they tend to trigger a bit higher inflammation. And why that is, I don't exactly know yet, but this is what we're working on very hard now to really establish this. If it's a common theme for exposures in general, a stress reaction of our bodies, and obviously this low grade inflammation could have also lots of effects on our health and maybe help explain some findings that cannot be always connected just to the endocrine disruptive mechanisms.
So that is scary. um, what advice would you give a couple who are trying to get pregnant and their exposure to chemicals, but also what they're eating?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to those more persistent chemicals that accumulate in the body, it's quite difficult to change them with our lifestyle. So I would not really worry about those at all. But what we can affect are, for example, the phthalates, and that's the plastics and perfumes. So just try to do a little check at your home and see if you can reduce the use of just plastics and cosmetics. And this will have an impact. I mean, studies show that changing the lifestyle will connect to the levels of phthalates and bisphenols in your body because they are metabolized very quickly. These chemicals are really ingested and we pee them out basically. The reason we are finding them in our bodies constantly is because we're constantly exposed. So just disrupting the exposure through the plastics and cosmetics will lower your levels. And it takes, for the oocytes, the final maturation steps in the ovaries every month it's a couple of weeks, and of course the whole process of growing an egg is months. So if you want to get pregnant next year, you might as well start doing these changes now, and they will also help sperm counts. So this is not women's responsibility alone. I think it is an effort of both parents involved and should be seen as a collective responsibility and not an extra assignment to women.
That's really good advice. So, just to finish off, I wanted to try and be a little bit more positive. Pauliina, is there anything in our future that you feel is good? I mean, regulation is going to be difficult. Safety standards of these products is difficult. We've talked about the problem with public awareness and being bombarded by brilliant marketing by these big companies is is a losing battle for people like us who we don't get the exposure on social media. So we are improving public awareness. But is there any hope in this field that you're feeling optimistic about?
Yes.
Good.
When I started my lab, I've had my research group for a bit over 10 years now. Um, the awareness was very, very low among the clinical community. I worked within a hospital, and people didn't really think we have any issues in Sweden with chemicals. You know, it's a clean country. And this has changed completely within the 10 years. So I'm really glad about the awareness within the clinical community that is rising. When the endocrine societies are working a lot on the topic of EDCs and chemical pollution, and of course through the clinicians, the doctors, if they become more trained in these questions, we still tend to believe the doctors. So I mean, having this circle of information going to the citizens from different levels is really good. Then in my teaching, when I get to talk about these topics to younger people, well, first of all, they usually don't have a clue. They had no idea that, getting the latest beauty set of 20 products you apply to your face in the morning would not be, that there would be any problems with that. So raising the awareness there is makes me actually happy. I can see that they are ready to listen. They didn't have a clue, and they are also happy to make changes in their life, at least the ones that I've been teaching. So I think that the interest from the younger people, it also links the general environmental movement. Because obviously, plastics and chemicals are made of fossil fuels and raw oil. So the more we produce, the more oil we need to pump to the market, and the more the climate changes. So it is an interconnected field that I think the young people are more, they don't feel hopeless yet. So they are ready to work more on these issues. So that's really makes me happy. And then the message of don't get scared. I mean, this is not going to help anyone. Just get really upset, get pissed, angry at the construction of the society that allows this problem to amplify and go on, and do something about it. If you're quiet, nobody's going to do a change. So just, be ready to fight and voice your opinions, what you want to have.
That's brilliant advice. It is a fight, though. I can tell you from my just even the last few days, if we speak out, we are going to get people that are going to argue with us all the time. But please, can we be strong and definitely do what you say? We need to do something. We need to act. We can clean up our own act, our little part of us, our little micro environment, our bubble around us. But let's make sure people are really aware, and we all clean up our act. And if we don't buy these products, that will be a really big effect on these companies if we stop. So as I said, I've stopped doing loads and loads of things after listening to you. Wow. It's such an important message. I'm so pleased that we've recorded this. But I am going to finish on something happier, which I always do with all my guests. I like people to be happy. So we've heard some heavy stuff today from you. But Pauliina, what makes you happy, and where is your happy place?
So I I do like to spend time alone, and I think that often helps me restore, seeing maybe some nature and just going for runs or walks, or back to the farm where I was born and raised, to the Finnish forests in the archipelago. And I always also visit my favorite vintage store. It is something I cannot explain, but old clothes make me so happy. Finding dresses and clothes made in 60s, 70s, or even 50s that are in brilliant shape. They've been done so well. They have all these details we lost through the times because now the fashion is fast. So if I can wear clothes that are older than me, like this shirt today, I just feel so happy. I don't need to contribute to the textile industry exploitation of the nature, and this fast fashion that we know is not good. I can just have the good old stuff. It makes me so very happy. And then there's the times when I feel frustrated enough I need to hit the gym, and my favorite sport is kickboxing. I think it's a good social activity that you train with somebody else, and you really forget about everything you had at work that day because you have to be very focused. So for me, it's like mindfulness. And I think all the endorphins from the heavy exercise also always make me feel better afterwards. So nature, old clothes, and sweat at the gym make me happy.
Well, I think after doing your research and getting upset during the day, I think going to the gym and doing some kickboxing is a great way for you to let out all that anger. And I am very obsessed with people spending time both alone and in nature. And I've just finished my next book, and there's a whole chapter about that. And I think we need to embrace it. And you're going to be very pleased with me. So when I was a teenager, so about over 40 years ago, I used to make my own clothes, and I was too big for them for many, many years. I was too big for them, but I've lost some weight. And I am now wearing, not actually today, but I am wearing now the clothes that I made 30, 40 years ago. I'm still wearing, and they, as you said, the material, I very, very noticed the material that I made these dresses from 35 years ago, most of them were made, is so beautiful and intact. It's not like the material that we are taking now, which it doesn't feel anything. It's stunning. So I love that. I love your three ways to have happiness. And the very last question, what advice would you give your younger self?
I've been thinking about that, and I think the advice is it stays the same through the years. I think the advice would be that, you know, the world is in constant change. So what I might find, what I'm worrying about now within my 5 year plan, for example, is maybe not even relevant anymore. So it makes more sense to focus on doing my stuff now, doing what I like and doing it well. And new opportunities will always come. I think this is something I've learned over the years, that it can be a dead end, and then suddenly you find something new worth pursuing. So paths in lives and careers are never linear progression as we are told by the career coaches all the time. It is a progression where you have to keep your eyes and ears open for the next steps, and somehow there is always a next step. And there's so many wonderful people out there. So I would have told my younger self, and I keep telling myself now, that you will find your place no matter what.
That's beautiful. I always say, find your tribe. And I always say, life is a journey. Thank you so much, Pauliina. It's been absolutely brilliant. I want people, as you have suggested, to get upset, get out there, make a change. Let's make a change for the future of our planet, the future of our people, the future of our children, and let's try and clean up this act that we didn't create individually, but it's here. It's here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.